Time, let's get back to brass tacks and introduce our speaker for the week, the month. Storyboard artist, illustrator, cartoonist, Llyn Hunter.
Thanks very much. Let's see here. Thank you. Where to begin? Just to let you know, I've been a professional artist since I was probably, Lord, I have to think about that. When I was 12, I got my first job working with the art director at the Mesa Public Library. And at 18, I went back there to see if I could get a page position, because boy, did I love the library. And the art director was taking the summer off, and they gave me her position. So that's how I got into becoming a professional artist at 18. And I have been more or less working on and off as a professional artist since I was 18 in production and graphic design and art direction. I was the art director for the Los Angeles Zoo for about 1.5 years, and was the art director for a small publishing firm called Frank Schaefer Publications that did educational materials for a while, and was doing my stint trying to be a children's illustrator, and found that I was working 60 to 80-hour weeks trying to make a living as a freelance illustrator. And while I was doing that, I was taking classes at the Animation Union. If you live in Los Angeles, the union offers classes to basically union artists or union members get first dibs at the classes, but they always have life drawing, as well as like classes in layout and storyboarding and things like that at the union. And I was regularly taking life drawing at the union just because it was a great place to do 2-minute poses. I went down there like once a week doing life drawing classes, and the person who was teaching the class at the time was a gentleman by the name of Glenn Vilp, who was a layout and storyboard artist. And I decided I wanted to get into storyboard art because I knew you could get a salaried position as a storyboard artist. They would there are a couple of studios in Los Angeles where they would hire artists out to advertising firms, and they would hire you for the day to do storyboards or what have you. So I thought, hey, I'd like to get a salaried job instead of this freelance where, I never know where my next paycheck's coming from, and I'm having to work like crazy just to get, all the bills paid every month. And at the time, there was storyboarding class at the union was being taught at the same time as the life drawing classes. And I told Glenn, since I'd been taking the class for like 4 years, and I said, Glenn, I'm going to be taking the storyboard class instead of your class the next semester around. And he said, you want to learn storyboarding? And I said, yeah. And he said, you want to work for me? And that's how I got into storyboarding. There was a show called Peter Pan and the Pirates. Glenn was doing both layout, and layout is taking the storyboard and using it to set up the initial shots for the animators. So an animator will get a background and usually a rough on the 3 extreme poses before they get to work on it themselves, and that's called layout. And Glenn was a good layout artist, and he was doing layout and storyboard at the same time, and he was finding it overwhelming. So he was going, what he thought he'd do is he gave me his storyboards to clean up. And that's how I learned to storyboard. So I got hired on to Peter Pan and the Pirates at that time for $500 a week. And this was back in 1990. And that was, I'd already actually made my money that year. I busted butt as an illustrator. So I'd already made enough money to cover my expenses for that year, so I could drop down to $500 a week and do that work for him. And basically that's how I got to learn storyboarding, and that's how I got into the profession. And the biggest problem when you're storyboarding for television over storyboarding for film is that you're doing around 100 drawings a week minimum. And so it's a lot of drawing, and it's a very short turnaround. Usually you have 5 weeks to turn around a third of a script, which is usually about 15, anywhere between 11 and 15 pages of script that you get done in 5 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks. So it's basically, you are constantly drawing and you're constantly running with your shoes untied. It is, you know, I can remember, you know, you do 30 pages of rough and then 30 pages of cleanup a day. It was always trying to get, you know, 10 to 30 pages done every day, and there would be 3 panels on a page. And that was on paper up until 2008. And what I find fascinating nowadays is that there's now an entire generation of people out there who have never worked on paper at all. We have, if you are interested in doing storyboarding or interested in doing animation of any kind, I would highly recommend Toon Boom Storyboard Pro. Unfortunately, it costs, get this, I have to pay $65 a month to own Toon Boom Storyboard Pro. You can get, I think it's Toon Boom Storyboard. It's like one step down for like $25 a month. It's like, let's all kill Adobe for requiring that people pay monthly fees for computer programs. As far as I'm concerned, Adobe is the demon and the enemy. If you need to have some alternatives to Adobe, if you would like some suggestions for other programs that are less expensive that work well, I got some good advice on those too. But I'm required to at least have Toon Boom Storyboard Pro, and because if you're going to do anything for the industry, that's what they require nowadays. Thank you, Disney. As a matter of fact, I can't even show anything in my portfolio that's in pencil anymore. They'll look at that and say, you know, you're not fresh enough, or you don't know what you're doing, what have you. But once I got into animation, go quick, 30 years of it. But I went from working at Peter Pan and the Pirates, was my very first show that I worked on. I went to working on Prince Valiant, which poor Hal Faster would be rolling in his grave if he knew about the scripts and what they did to Prince Valiant. It went to, I think you can, I've got a video tape of those particular episodes. I kept on trying to get the writers to stick somehow to the Middle Ages, I mean, Hal Foster even went way, you know, took great license with the Middle Ages, but what these people were doing used to drive me nuts. Then I went to Disney. I got into their apprentice program, and I worked on Little Mermaid, Darkwing Duck, raw tunage. Let's see here, Quack Pack. Trying to think, what was the last show that I did before I left Disney? Aladdin, worked on Aladdin. And then I went over to Universal, worked on Beethoven. Went to Warner Brothers to work on Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain. Down to Sony, worked on a show that nobody will ever know called Project Geeker. Went from Sony back to Warner Brothers again for some more Pinky and the Brain. Went to Disney, back to Disney for Hercules. Went to Universal to work on another iteration of Woody Woodpecker. I mean, there have been so many versions of Woody Woodpecker, it's insane. Worked on some Scooby-Doo, Buzz Lightyear at Disney, Lord, Yin Yang Yo at Disney. I'm trying to think, lots of Curious George. They've had 10 seasons of Curious George, and I have worked on just about all of them. let's see here, what else is on top of my head? And just recently I worked on, like I said, Rock Dog, and some more Scooby-Doo, and the one that I supposedly can't talk about, but it doesn't really matter because none of you would probably, it's like one of those that's going out to one of the like Hulu or one of those called Weird Al Soccer All-Stars. So I've been doing quite a bit of storyboarding for quite a while, and I can go into details. Does anybody have any questions before I ramble on? Or shall I continue?
Llyn, could I kind of ask, I don't know how much time you're going to devote to an actual history in your career, but methodology and what you're doing now, I suppose what you used to do, and what technical solutions you found. Things like, I mean, you're talking to artists here and they all want to know how you do it.
Okay, great. Which is, thank you. That's a good thing to ask. Basically what happens with storyboarding is you get, usually you have materials that are handed out to you about the show. You'll get backgrounds, props, and character design. So the first thing, if you come on, let's say, I'll give an example for, let's say Curious George as an example. You'd come onto the show. The first thing you do as you're getting hired onto the show is you get a Bible. So it'll give you the background of, here are the main characters. These are what we're expecting from the main characters and what have you. You'll get a standard turnarounds on the characters. So you'll have front, backside, 3/4. So you'll get basically what an animator would get to work with. You'll get props and you'll get backgrounds. And what you'll usually do is you're assigned, okay, your first script. And I'll just take one from one of I'll give you the horror script. Since we're coming on Halloween here, I did one for Curious George called Nightmare on Elm Street, where George is having nightmares about a green rhino. Okay, so I first get a script. I'm given half of the script. I'll be given, and actually, no, they take that back. With Curious George, I'm given the full script. Sorry. It all depends. If you're given a 22-minute episode, if it's full of action, they'll divide that amongst 3 storyboard artists. If you're given, if it's got less action, they might divide it among 2. With Curious George, it's considered a 7-minute show because they'll usually put a live action piece at the end of the show. So the 11 minutes is filled up by a piece of live action where the kids are doing something that is somewhat related to the show. So it's a 7-minute script. And so the full actual storyline you're given. Okay, you'll be given the script. You read through the script, and then you're given what's called a handout. And you'll sit down with the director, the producer in this case, because in Curious George, the producer was technically the executive director as far as I'm concerned. And you would read through the script together. And if there were any particular pieces that they wanted to be pushed a particular way, your director will tell you what those are. And in the handout too, you'll have the prop guy, the background guy. Color usually isn't in there at this point. But it's usually your prop person, your background person, storyboard, and the directors will be in a meeting together, what's called a handout. Then you'll take the script back to your desk and usually you thumb it out, or it's called thumbnailing, and you'll thumbnail out the script. And you'll go through the script and basically do small thumbnails of how you'd like to see the direction going. I personally like to board what I call boarding straight ahead. And when I used to do it on paper, we had 3-panel paper on 11 by 17 pages. And I would thumbnail out the whole thing they usually have them in 2.5 or 3-inch by 4-inch squares. At the time. Nowadays with Toon Boom, I will literally do one layer on top of another layer. Toon Boom almost looks, you can do a scene at a time. and I will draw my boarding up almost like doing animation, because nowadays when we're doing the work for the different studios, the problem is it used to be we were doing the storyboards for animators, and they would go from our boards to layout, and the layout would set it up for the animators, and then the animators would take it to the next step. So basically all we had to do is the blueprint. Nowadays, the producers are looking at the storyboards, and they can't do what they couldn't even do it before. They used to be, your board would be done and it would look like a giant comic strip. So you were still setting up the shots for the animators. So you would do what you call the extremes, the beginning, the middle, and the end of a pose. Or if you were doing dialogue, you would always do a pose for every, what I would call every breath. Every time you saw a comma, you would do another pose. And those would be the extreme setups for the animator. So it was just like a blueprint. Nowadays, we're having to literally animate the boards. I am actually animating a cartoon before it gets animated. The only thing I'm leaving out are the in-betweens nowadays. And that is problematic in the respect that they don't give us enough time to do it. I mean, it's one of these things that I can animate as well as you know, set up a storyboard, but that's the way things are going nowadays. But anyways, let me get back to what we do next. But I thumbnail that out. And then I'll rough out over that. Basically, with something like Toon Boom, I'm taking layers and I'll spread them out so that I'll have complete scenes. So each panel that goes in a scene, and a scene will have usually anywhere from 3 to 7 panels in it before you cut. And so you usually need, like I said, 3 to 7 drawings to explain the scene before you cut. And with cutting, you get a change of a background. The best way to describe it is when you go from, say, a close-up to a wide shot. That's going to be a cut. So you have 3 basic camera shots. You have close-up, medium shot, far shot. And if you use them for different portions of telling a tale. If you're on a medium shot, it's usually dialogue. If you're on a close-up, you're usually focusing on somebody's face or expression or something that's important in a shot. If you're in wide shot, you're telling a next move to the story. In dialogue, you know, you're telling one person's viewpoint when they're talking, and you're cutting to another viewpoint, person's viewpoint when they're talking. And again, that's most of your storytelling is on medium shots. But so the thing is that when you set up the storyline, you're setting up all these different shots to tell the story. Very good. Is it Toon Rock is showing my close-up, medium, and far. Very good. But the thing is that that's basic. Your basic shots, like I said, are close, medium, far, and then your basic camera angles. So you have 3 shots, and then you have 3 angles, which is low, medium, and high. And again, those 6 things together are basically your full-on what you're doing with filmmaking. But anyways, from doing the thumbnails, then you do roughs. You'll give your roughs to your director. Your director will go through it, and he'll change staging, acting, things the way that he would like to see them. And that's where it's like when you're doing this, you're running with your shoelaces untied. So the thing is that you're going to miss some stuff. You just put down the first thing that comes into your head when you put it down in the script. It's like when I read a script, I always usually see a film in my head right away, and I just put down the film that I see in my head. And I rarely second guess my shots because for the most part, I'm putting down the film I see in my head. And then sometimes your director can come in and he'll look at what you've set up, and he'll say, you know, or she'll say, I've had mostly male directors. I'm trying to think. I have been a director. I have yet to have a woman director. All of my directors have been males. That's another thing in this industry that's very rather interesting. It's getting to change, but for the most part, storyboards are done primarily by guys still. They actually also have more, they'll have more women on girls shows, but I'll go into that in a second. Let me finish off this, but so you'll take it to the director. The director will go through your board during the rough stage. You'll go back and then you'll clean it up totally. And then it'll go back to the director. He'll again revise things. It'll usually go to some revision artists. You usually have a staff of revision artists, so that after you've turned in your final board, it'll still go to the revision artist for revisions. Then it'll go to an ADR person, basically a video person, who will put it into something like Premiere, which is an editing program. So even the Toon Boom will go into Premiere, and they'll put in, they'll readjust the dialogue and the timing. And before it is then sent overseas, they'll still print it out. And the funny thing is since we're doing it in Toon Boom now, a lot of the times they're asking the board artists to set up the timing. And they're also asking the board artists to put in all the dialogue. And thank Lord, I haven't been on a show yet, but some places are asking for special effects. But at present, that hasn't gone quite that far yet. But nowadays, it's not just the storyboarding. I mean, like I said, my storyboards used to look like these giant tomes of like usually 300, anywhere from 150 to 300 pages. And nowadays, they're all on computer. But nowadays, my giant tomes that used to look like comic books now look like animated films. And like I said, it's like now when they're looking at a portfolio, they want to see your animatics, what are called animatics. Basically, they want to see animation rather than PDFs. And I put them both in my portfolio, but it's like they see the pencil and oh no, there is a real ageism problem in animation right now too. So I'm actually having troubles finding a new job because my stuff doesn't look badly drawn. And that's what they want in Los Angeles now, is they want the how shall I say, they want the Beavis and Butthead is coming back. And Rick and Morty. I mean, I tested for Rick and Morty a long time ago and didn't get hired for the show. You have to learn how to draw badly, which is something too, because I've done lots of Disney shows and I've done lots of, for CGI, what's crack up is that they'll ask for board artists for CGI, and you board for CGI. CGI is basically the 3-dimensional or computer generated animation. You board the same way for CGI as you do for 2D animation. So it's like, whenever they say, oh, we're looking for CGI board artists, and it's like, that always just dumbfounds me. So it's like, I know I can move the camera around 360, big deal. It's like, even when I was doing 2D animation, we would create banana pans to give the illusion of 3 dimensions. Now we don't have to do banana pans anymore. Banana pan is where you go small and then large and back again. And you design your layout so that it would distort as if you were using a wide angle lens. And it just, to me, it dumbfounds me when, it just dumbfounds me when people don't understand that. But again, it goes back to HR departments and the fact that right now, my biggest problem in animation is that how you get your foot in the door when when all your directors and all the HR that you worked with in the past have retired. And now I'm knocking on doors where I've got 30 years experience, and I literally have a resume where I only show 8 years of animation on it. Because if you have previous to that, they think you're old, you don't know how to use a computer, and therefore we don't want you. So those are some of the things that I'm running into. Let's see here. What else would there people like to hear about? I mean, it's there. I can go all over the place. Any questions, anybody yet? Or Donna,
What the heck? I'm going to ask. You know, of course, that whenever there's a collapse, everybody goes off on self-publishing. And so many times in the past, movies and everything else have been picked up by the artists taking over the situation themselves because it's gotten so desperate. Any news on artist-run studios, something like that going on?
you know, one of the things, I'm part of the experienced artists or as experienced workers committee, yeah, for my union. And one of the people who was in that was suggesting, it's like, hey, why don't we all get together and start our own studio? There is, if you haven't seen it on YouTube, check out Hell of a Boss. I'm not sure how she started it. I'm forgetting the artist's name right now. But there are definitely, she's starting her own YouTube channel. She's pushed her own stuff. She is her own channel. And the problem is with the artist centric, like UPA, if anybody knows about UPA, was started by a bunch of artists in Los Angeles who got together and opened their own studio. That's the Mr. Magoo, and those particular cartoons were independently done. They were a group of artists that got together and did it. The problem is that you have to have one spearhead who's willing to say, hey, I'm willing to put my ego aside, put my art aside, and be in control of gathering together these artists to do this. And it takes a special independent personality. And it's like, the problem is it's the belling of the cat. And we're all cats. You know what I mean? It's like, who's gonna, with the mice, who's gonna bell the cat? Well, it's like we're artists are cats. We don't herd together. We, no matter what, we have our own independent projects, our own independent stuff, and trying to get us together to do anything is difficult. The one thing is that if you have money, I was thinking, whenever I go out to buy the lottery ticket, and I do buy lottery tickets, just because I am of the ilk, you can't win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket. So I throw down my $2 once a week to get a lottery ticket. And you see that, right now Powerball is at 436 million. And I'm thinking I could start an animation studio with that. And you go, that's what it takes. And the one person who is doing that, I haven't seen how they've done thus far, but shoot, the brothers, the guys who did Mulan. I'm drawing a blank. I hate that when I do that. There is a couple of guys who've been in animation for quite some time who are trying to start their own studio. So they were trying to raise their money through a Kickstarter. It looks like they're doing a good job of it. There was a steampunk piece, again, group of artists used a Kickstarter, trying to do something with it. Haven't seen anything out of it.
Their name was Tony Bancroft.
Yes, thank you. Tony Bancroft and his brother. Yes. And I haven't checked lately to see how that's been going. But Tony Bancroft is a phenomenal artist. He is known for, he did the animation on Pumbaa, Timon and Pumbaa in Lion King, and he and his brother are responsible for a lot of Disney stuff, and they had their own studio, and they're trying to get like a Neo Disney going. So yeah, is going, but with some people, but the first things first, you got to have money. And the one thing that animation takes is organization and money, and actually more organization than money. But the thing is if you want to get artists to do anything in an organized fashion, just say, here's your paycheck, there's your deadline. And the thing is that if you don't have, here's your paycheck, there's your deadline, you don't have artists doing anything.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that deadline is the one thing we all need. With me, I mean, it's like, it's the thing that has gotten me going on my comic book. Okay. I have a Patreon, and the one thing that my Patreon does for me, I'm required to give my patrons a comic book page every week, or I'm required to give my patrons something every month. And if I don't, I have let them down. And by giving them something every month, I mean, I've kicked myself. I'm up to, I'm finished off my second chapter of my graphic novel. I'm going on chapter 3. And I've, in the past year and a half that I've been working on it, I have missed 1 week. I've been late. I mean, I try to get it done on Saturdays. I was supposed to get it done today. It's not done today, but I've gotten that page done every week. So it's one of those things. But when it comes to animation, I swear it's a big financial proposition. And if you're going to get a herd of cats to do anything, you have to have fundage first. You have to say, okay, you're required to deliver something to me because I'm paying you to do it. And I can't see people doing it because one person dropping the ball, everybody drops the ball. And if you're doing a team effort like that, there's got to be some money behind it. I can't see in this day and age, people just can't get together on a wish. And trying to be in control of that and doing the financing of that. And that's just, I just look at that, and it's kind of like somebody suggested that we do that with our experienced workers committee, because we have quite a few people that there, especially as we're getting to this age, we're getting more and more gaps between you get a job, it'll take you for anywhere from 4 to 9 months, you get laid off, and then the gap might be a year before you get another gig. And that's been happening more and more frequently since like the first 10 years of my career in animation. I was never without a job, ever. 2000 hit, and then I started getting sporadic breaks. And ever since 2000, I've had 4 breaks where it's been anywhere from 1 to 2 years between gigs. And I can handle that because I don't have kids. And every time I get a break, I go back to freelancing. I go back to, using my house as my house is my savings account, and I keep myself afloat that way. And then I'll get working for a year and a half, pay off the bills, and then you'll have a huge break again. And what's really interesting and strange, and the things that are going on, is that we've got this new world of the streaming, and everybody's got their streaming channel out there now. And so animation has never been as big as it is right now, because still animation is still cheaper to produce per half-hour episode than live action is. So the thing is that it's a boom industry out there right now. On the other side of things is that it's a saturated market, because once Lion King happened, every school, it used to be there were only 2 schools in the entire United States that offered a degree in animation. And one was in Florida, and the other one was in Canada. Okay, you had Ringling School had a degree in animation, and I'm trying to think of the name of the one in Canada, because Canada was subsidizing their animation industry through the government. And the thing is that there was no such thing as a degree in animation before Lion King came out. And people were scrambling for every studio in Los Angeles all of a sudden wanted to do a feature because of how much money the Lion King made. And all of a sudden there weren't enough animators to go around. So all the HR departments were calling up every, art school across the nation looking for, hey, do you have any kids who can animate? And they had no animation degree. And they thought, oh, well, how much does a person in animation make? Oh, around 100,000 a year. Whoa, we better get our, schools to all have animation programs. Yeah. So they start cranking kids out of school who don't have this. It's like it takes a special kind of brain to do that kind of work. It takes a special skill set. Not everybody can handle the pressure. Not everybody can handle the stuff. And it's not animators that you need because they do all the animation overseas. They do all the pre-production in the United States.
Yeah.
And so they're turning all these kids out of school, and you're going to have some really good, talented kids. They're going to be, there's that top 1 to 10% coming out of every school that will be able to be an animator. And then they all come to Mecca, also known as Los Angeles. And all of a sudden I'm competing with all these kids from everywhere. And then on top of that, now every school is turning out kids in animation who are getting free software from places like Toon Boom and Harmony and places like that, where I'm having to pay for mine. And I'm having to pay for all the upgrades. And they're turning them out like crazy. And the thing is, again, they have really pretty portfolios, but can they do 100 drawings a week? You take a year to make your nice, pretty portfolio and your nice, pretty drawings and your nice, pretty thing. And it looks great for that HR person who looks at that piece, but it doesn't say, can you do 100 drawings a week? And that's what I'm competing with right now. That's one of the things that, when we're talking about changes in, what are we doing today compared to what were we doing before? Or if, you guys are cartoonists, I mean, let's face it, we don't have the magazines anymore. Magazines are a thing of the past, which I don't know about you guys, I miss my newsstand. I miss going and, the local newsstand where you had 50 million of anything you wanted and being able to flip through those photographs. That's not in anymore. It's like you go to the local newsstand and it's like, what happened to all the magazines? And they're now on the internet. It's now Facebook. It's now Instagram. It's now Tumblr. It's now Twitter. And that's where everything is. And the thing is that figuring out how to make that a monetization to make a living as an artist when, or as a cartoonist, along with what we're doing. I mean, animation has been an amazing and wonderful career for me. And personally, my big problem, get this, like I said, I've been in animation for 31 years. I'm going through a dry spell right now, trying to find a job. I've had to test for the one thing that we never had to do up until it's been in the past 10 years. And I have gotten only 2 jobs from testing. But now they're not even able to look at what I do on the internet. They're giving me a test like you would give an actor, okay, I want you to get up and act this part, and you do it the way I want you to do it. And so I'm getting tested for storyboards against, and these tests are like cattle calls. They'll give them out to 50 different people. And the thing is that a test doesn't show a lot of times I've been giving these tests and going, what are you testing here?
Just one of those free work scams or
Oh yeah.
oh.
No, and the free work scam is coming off of union shops that our union is doing nothing about. It's one of the biggest complaints among the union. I mean, I've been complaining at the union for years. It's like, why are we not getting paid for these tests?
Yeah, it's the Graphic Artist Guild has been big
Mhm.
on this as well. Oh, it started. Roger, you had a question? Or you had your hand raised there anyway?
No.
Me again.
Just got one.
Down below, I just put in something. We're all talking about the new models and everything, and there's several people on TikTok and these various other channels, and the wave of the future is short. And you've got everything from cooking channels to somebody doing her own acting. And one that really went crazy in the course of about a year was Max Miller's Tasting History. And after he got this thing rolling along, he's just testing ancient recipes. And he used to work with Disney. He was an actor. He worked, in the various areas in Disney. And when he had to come up with a choice of whether he stayed with Disney or just went off and kept doing his YouTube channel, which had monetized, he chose the YouTube channel because that's where the living was. Look up Call Me Chris and watch a woman with nothing more than her little phone and some baby hands has got, within the course of a couple of years, got 10 million followers. It's monetized. Stuff is short. The model is different. People don't necessarily sit down for full length anymore, and there is so much brilliant stuff out there. I mean, there's people running animation channels all over the place and monetizing.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that we turn away from the massive features of animation, which are incredible. Of course, the massive features of animation right now are superhero movies.
Yeah.
They're mostly animated.
Yeah.
But there's so much call and there's so many followers for just little pops of animation, and people are doing all kinds of this stuff and they're making livings at it. And of course, like you said about Patreon, get your butt off the ground, do your Patreon to make your patrons happy, or they'll go away. And it works. I mean, you see me doing a lot less than you are. I mean, you're doing amazing stuff. But I seem to keep my patrons happy. But we may have to also be looking at that world of short pop quick animation. Well, you know what the advertisers have done? If they don't get a very good, very funny ad out in 15 seconds, they lose their audience. People don't want to see it. It's got to be funny enough. You'll watch a Geico commercial.
Yeah.
And that may be our future there. I mean, we all love these great big long animated features, but to build up a new, it's breaking, and it's got to build up another way.
Well, I'm taking some cues from I don't know if you guys know CPG Gray. I just tripped across him recently. He's an educator. His big thing, he was a teacher, and he just got interested in doing videos, and he uses stick figures. And he got his big turnover on YouTube was he did one on Great Britain and the United Kingdom. And he did like a 5-minute short on what the difference is between Great Britain and the United Kingdom. And he currently has over 3 million viewers to his channel. He's got a Patreon. I just went through, he puts out a 5-minute video about once a month. But he's like, also, if you've ever watched CC, it's Crash Course. Crash Course is nothing but they're a combination of animation and John Green or one of his associates talking about history into 10-minute bites on history, or 10-minute bites on biology, or 10-minute bites on anything. But he uses and interstitials of animation to make those work too. But and again, it's one of these things where if you can animate it, if you can, like I said, CPG Gray, look him up. He uses stick figures. And it's like, you know, if you're doing stick figures, animate them. Put them
All
up
the
on,
language channels are animating, and there's one guy, I can't remember his name, but he is second generation Vietnamese, and he does the most god awful, brutal Japanese histories you ever saw in your life. And they've got quick jump animation, little flat drawings that he does, and just his attitude toward them, he's hilarious, and he keeps growing followers. Or look up the mythology guy, his little TikToks. He's just playing the part of various mythological characters, and he's got a beard and long hair. And I'll tell you, when he plays Hera or some other goddess, he just puts a towel around him. It's hilarious, and his followers are just going through the roof.
Oh, Roger, you had your hand raised there.
Yes, Miss Hunter, the opinion, I want your opinion of the Americanization of the products from foreign countries. How badly are they Americanizing the look of the product to put all of us out of business because they're lower wage type of thing?
oh, that's it's just going to happen. It's one of these things where, like I was talking earlier before everybody came on, with the internet, it's just like, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. I mean, we can talk, we're talking here, I'm assuming that most everybody here is from the United States, just because it's the Northwest Coast Cartoonists get together. And it's just, that's where you guys have met just now. But it's like, I'm down in California, and most of you guys are up north in like Oregon and I'm in Washington and that area. So the thing is that there's no reason why somebody couldn't be here from Canada, or somebody couldn't be here from Taiwan, or somebody couldn't be here from Great Britain. And this is the way meetings go. If I need to talk in a storyboard, I was talking about a storyboard handout. I have done storyboard handouts over Zoom. Because of COVID, everybody's doing stuff over Zoom. Well, all the executives have already realized they don't have to have artists that are from Los Angeles anymore. I mean, I've been part of a union for, like I said, 30 years, as long as I've been in the industry. And that's been of a major advantage to me, because I've actually got a retirement when I hit 65, because I was part of a union and because I've been working with union shops. I have something that very few artists have. I've got a pension. Here's the thing. I don't think that the juniors are going to have that opportunity, just because they're not going to have the hours, because their connections are not going to last them as long as mine have thus far. And the fact that all the world is going to come in, you're asking about American products. The thing is that if you watch Netflix, people don't mind reading subtitles. Okay. No. There are also a lot of, I've watched a couple of Chinese animated pieces that were written in China. I know they were written in China. They dubbed in English voices, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference per se, unless there are some cultural differences, if you can notice them. But they're very cute. Well done. Kids in China like them as well as kids in the United States. And if they're smart, it's like, I'm a big Japanese anime fan. And one of the things that cracks me up is with the Japanese, they have to kill everybody in the end. They love sorrow and killing everybody off. It always drives me nuts in the end when, you're going to kill off all your heroes. Well, the Koreans, much better at endings. Okay. Their romance stuff is getting real good. And they're bringing in their stuff. Also, if you're looking at live action, Georgia is taken away a lot of the live action stuff from Los Angeles. Canada has taken a lot of the live action stuff away from the United States. People don't want to pay what it costs to do work in Los Angeles. And people don't want to pay what it costs in the United States, and they can go to cheaper places, and nothing is going to stop them. Nothing. So it's like, it's just with art in general. I mean, it's like if you look at Tumblr. Okay, here's an example. I did some fanzine work with I fell in love with Voltron. If you have not seen Voltron on Netflix, highly recommend it. Great soap opera, wonderful storyline, fun, funny animation. If you like TV shows, the current Voltron on Netflix is great up until season 7. Then leave it behind. But the thing is that I got together with some, what I call 20 somethings on the internet and did some fan art for Voltron. We got together and did some fanzine work. These girls were from all over the world. I have friends now in Italy, Brazil, Japan, Ireland, France. These girls got together. These are 20 somethings from all over the world to put together this comic book and writing work on Voltron. Okay. These are young women who are going to, I mean, they have office jobs and what have you, but they still need to express their love of fandom for a particular thing by creating writing and art. And they're doing it themselves, and they're putting together we created a really nice book together. A lot of people bought it. And this is the sort of thing that's going on through the internet. The problem is, this is not making anybody a living. It's a great hobby. Most of these girls could have been professional writers. Most of these girls could have been professional artists. Some of them are. Some of them are making livings by doing non-licensed work. They'll sell like Voltron fan art on the internet. There's a couple of them. They go under pseudonyms. There's one called Lightning Strikes, who does work in Australia. She left her graphic design job because she was making so much money doing the Voltron fan art that now she does it exclusively. So there are these underlying markets for art. It's just, can you make a living at them forever? I have a friend known as Mondai Joe, who's got a Patreon, who's making a living off her Patreon. It's X-rated stuff. And the thing is sex sells. You can do sex-based art. Patreon doesn't have a problem with it. You can get patrons, and there are a lot of people who are doing all kinds of beautiful boy on boy, girl on girl, girl on boy, beautiful artwork all over the internet who are getting paid for that. So there are all kinds of ways of making art and making money on art. It's just getting there.
I got a quick suggestion here. NASA is finally facing the fact that if we're going to be a space traveling species, we have to face human sexuality, including accepting masturbation. And so there you go. There's your animation right there. Do your animation for a NASA that says this is, which of course is ridiculous because the kids are going to figure out their own sexuality and everything. This is this 1950s mindset. You know, and basically the idea that if you're, okay, when I was in the Army and you had a barracks and you had a small area and you had to do certain things, everybody knew better than to stop and stare. You turned around and left. That kind of thing was going on. There was things going on in the barracks, and NASA is now facing that. So if you want to propose an animation for them as a teaching tool, you could always approach them. Animation would be great.
Actually, it's like, I'm not sure how they monetize that sort of thing. Yeah, you can't do it on YouTube.
Well, I'm sure that you know, that NASA's got money. They pay for a project.
True enough. But again, that's the sort of thing that when it comes to animation, the best bet is you still can do stuff individually. If anybody's interested in doing their own animation, for things like YouTube, I would highly recommend. Unfortunately, for payment wise, there's still the best programs are Adobe Animate, which used to be Flash, or Toon Boom Harmony. But what is a good substitute is, if you can't afford it, I'm a big fan of Clip Studio Paint. If you want to do animation and you can't afford all of Adobe's fun tools, my big thing was I bought the entire suite before you couldn't buy it anymore. I've got CS6 everything. And I've got a computer that's reserved completely for utilizing the complete CS6 suite. So until they no longer use MPV as a profile for videos, I still have a way to make videos without knuckling under to the Adobe beast. But if you do have to find a way to do animation, I would, and you don't want to deal with Adobe, I'm a big recommender for getting Clip Studio Paint. Their big program, I think, is only $122 if you've never used it. Their small program is $50. And sometime around this time of the year, they will offer their big package for $50. Usually every year around the holidays, Clip Studio Paint offers up its software for something around $50. And it is as powerful as Adobe. I use Clip Studio Paint for my coloring in my comic book just because it's easier. And then I correct color in Photoshop. But if you're looking for something where you don't have to rent from Adobe on an annual basis, I would highly recommend getting Clip Studio Paint. Or everybody's favorite now, it's like you can animate in Procreate. I do little animations in Procreate occasionally. It's not the best program for animation, but you can use it for that. Let's see here. Anything else? What or any other direction you guys want me to take you in?
I've been giving all the suggestions. Come on, people. You've got to be having some good stuff here.
Well, let me go back on stories of insanity and ridiculousness. It's like, it's always fun. I can go back through the mind of things that are fun and ridiculous, such as with the new animating in the software when you're doing Toon Boom for a storyboard. I was given a week to do a sequence that my director wanted to look at, and it had I think it had close to 200 drawings in it. And you sit there and you hit the play button, and okay, so the whole thing plays through, and then your director goes, "That's it?" Yeah, I just spent a whole week and 60 hours, and that's it. That is the biggest problem when you're doing things for animation, is when you get that kind of a response. Or things that, going back a little bit further, one of my favorites with Curious George is, as I say, I'm going through my head, favorite stories. Working on Curious George, I did my favorite episode was called Curious George and the Slithery Day. And you're doing this for preschoolers. And this particular episode, Curious George is doing, of all things, babysitting a snake and 2 rats for Mr. Zubel, who is the artist. And he is going out for the day. And for some reason, George is supposed to babysit the snake and 2 rats who are in the separate terrariums. And they get out, and the entire show takes place with George, who is a chimpanzee, And Hundley, who's a dachshund, who basically he's the guard dog for their apartment complex. So Hundley, George, the snake is chasing two rats. George is trying to capture both the snake and the rats, and Hundley is trying to get George back into the building because this whole thing takes place on the ledge around the building, which is delightful. I mean, it was fun and hilarity ensues. I mean, if you like slapstick, it was fun to do. There's one problem here. We're dealing with a preschool show. So I called up my director and I said, do we really, you're sure about this? I can do this. George is on the outside of a building chasing mice and rats around the building. And he said, oh yeah, not a problem. Go ahead, do that. It's like, I'm normally having to put helmets on kids who are riding bicycles. I'm normally having to put knee pads on kids on skateboards. And we're going to have a monkey chasing rats and a snake on the ledge of a building. This is imitative behavior. No, George is a monkey, so it's not imitatable behavior. Okay.
Monkey see, monkey do? I mean,
I know that was fine. We could do that. We could, you know, there are a million other things we couldn't have done. That we could do.
It reminds me of how in Batman the animated series, they always had Batman do roundhouse kicks more than punches, because the logic being kids were more likely to fall on their ass if they tried it.
Oh, there is a list of things that you cannot put in an animated cartoon. You cannot have somebody breaking glass. You cannot see a full-blown punch to the face. You can see a black, you know, that's why you get some sort of special effect before somebody punches to the face. You cannot have guns that shoot bullets. They can shoot bubbles, they can shoot goo, they can shoot anything but bullets. They can shoot nets, they can shoot rays, they can't shoot bullets. You cannot have explosions, you can't have people falling from buildings, you can't stick fingers in sockets anymore. Can't show that one. You know, I'm sure everybody saw the cartoon when you were a kid where somebody stuck a finger in a socket and they would light up like a fireworks. Another story, one of the best ones, when I was working at Disney, this was early on at Disney, they called in everybody who was working on every TV show. This was Disney Television Animation. We all came into the lunchroom because Broadcasting Standards and Practices was going to have a meeting with us about what we could and could not put in the cartoons and to be aware of them. And so she gave this film of what she had gotten together of old cartoons and what we shouldn't do. And there were some Chippendales and Bugs Bunnies and what have you.
oh dear.
Okay. And when she got done with this cartoon and she was asking for questions among the audience, one of our directors stood up and raised his hand and he said, you do know that every cartoon that you just showed us was an Academy Award-winning cartoon. And it was like Bully for Bugs was in there, and every single one of them, it was like, and I rolled them back through my head. I'm going, he's absolutely right. Every single cartoon that she said that they put in there was an Academy Award-winning cartoon. And here's the other creepy and true thing. No one, and never has any cartoon on television been taken to court because of anything in them. Broadcasting Standards and Practices, who set up these things that we cannot do in cartoons, is a self-censoring board. There is nothing, you know, it's like all the things that they tell us we can't do. Their lawyers have predetermined that this might bring a lawsuit. So therefore, we are not going to do them. Not that anybody who has ever brought a lawsuit ever to a cartoon, but that they might bring a lawsuit to a cartoon. So the companies self-censor their stuff. And this has been going on since there have been cartoons on television.
I have
So-
a question.
Yeah,
I'm sure there must be some really wonderful horror stories of big, wonderful projects that got so far and then completely imploded from within. Can you tell us any interesting tales of woe that you know of from the industry?
oh, I got a good one for you just on that one. Notoriously known as Stinkerbell, also known as the Titanic. There was when I was actually on a show called Yin Yang Yo at the time, working for Disney at with their I'm trying to think what they used to call it. They had it was like Project X or something. It was their hot kids show, but I was in the same building that they were working on the new Tinkerbell feature. And Tinkerbell, they finally got it to be a very bad franchise movie. If you've ever seen any of the Tinkerbell direct to videos, okay, that thing was 5 years before they had anything that was actually real. That thing got made and trashed and 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 made and trashed for 5 years before they actually had any kind of project out there. And that became a regular within Disney animation. With TV, I've worked primarily within the TV division for most of my career. And with TV, you've got basically it's a 1 year turnaround. Usually you're 6 months in production, 6 months in the completion with the folks that deal overseas. So usually you're working on a project for 6 to 9 months, and then you're moved on to something else. And the thing is that with those sorts of things, with television, they already had things scheduled. They already had things to roll. The other thing that went like that was something called Bonkers. It started out as a show to do an animated version or an animated TV show for Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And the character had been created by committee. It was one of those when they brought it to the people who were developing it. You had, again, non-artists making the decisions. And the original Bonkers was supposed to be a bobcat, but he looked like he had golf clubs for ears and Alka-Seltzer for feet. And we still drew him the way that, when we drew him, they basically produced 30 cartoons, got them back from overseas, and all of a sudden they decided, this really doesn't work and these cartoons are really bad. So they redid the entire show and in a completely different way before they released it again. And with those guys, what happened too, they were overwritten to death. One of the things is with television animation, you've only got 22 minutes to tell a story. And the biggest problem with what we do is that you'll have writers who are not reined back. The writer's words are gold. And what happens is that they'd write a script and all the funny is in the visual. And so the thing is, as a board artist, especially for television, we do half the writing because it's not the verbal jokes, it's the physical jokes. And you can have both, but it's like, if you miss the physical, you're not getting the punchline. It's like the verbal starts the joke, the visual plays it out and gives you the punchline. And they would write these scripts so terribly long that they would cut out all the jokes. So by the time you got done with the thing, you don't have funny anymore. All you've got is story and not really story. You've got the through line and nothing that's fun that's going along with it. So that often happens as well. And basically they because they didn't pare down the scripts, because they didn't decide on the right things before they sent it overseas, they ended up spending twice as much money on a show than what they needed to. And you see these every time management who doesn't know anything about the art and doesn't know anything about storytelling or doesn't know anything about funny gets involved in animation. It happens every time because you have executives who think, oh, this is a cartoon. And every single one of them is a little kid who's all of a sudden grown up and gotten to be in charge of something. And rather than think, you know, I want to make money off of this, they go, oh, I get to be in charge. I know more than any of the artists do. And that's often why when you see an animation and you go, this is boring, or this is dull, or great artwork, but it's like, why did I waste my time watching it? You can thank the executives in charge, because that's usually where, if it's a film, if it's animation, that's where it falls apart, because the people who do not know how to tell a story can't keep their fingers out of it. And that happens quite frequently. It doesn't, oddly enough, in television, you actually get less of that. But nowadays, it used to be, I worked for a director by the name of Alan Zaslow for all the Aladdin shows. And Alan would take a script and he would go through and he'd cross out, before we ever got the handout, he would cross out all the parts of the script that didn't work. So that when we got the script, it was timed down before we even got it. All the things that didn't work were taken out of it before we got it. And working for him was one of the most amazing things going, but Alan had complete control over the scripts. And what usually happens in most situations is that you have writers who are so in love with their script that they don't know that, hey, this is animation, you have to get it pared down to a particular time. And they'll let the entire, they think it's like a film where you can just cut things out and throw the film on a cutting room floor. Whereas with animation, you have to know what the story is going to be before you even start the work, because otherwise you're wasting everybody's time. And the problem is that too many people in film are used to being able to, oh, I'll just take the rushes and cut them down. And that isn't the way you can do it in animation. And it's one of these things, that's why when you get to a lot of animation where it doesn't work, it's because, again, you've got the people in animation don't know how animation works. It used to be, I used to complain about the fact that most of the secretaries in animation became the executives when I first got into animation. If they were like former secretaries of Hanna-Barbera, former secretaries of Warner Brothers, they would climb up the corporate ladder and they would get to be the people in charge. And I thought, oh, gee, what is this? All the secretaries are in charge. Well, the thing is the one thing I can say about that now, when I look back about it, those were the people who were in the trenches with everybody else. And they saw how the sausage was made, so that when they got to the top, they understood where you stick your fingers in and where you don't stick your fingers in. Nowadays, people who are in charge of things, they literally, they're taking the directors straight out of school. They're taking, hey, this kid came up with this great project. We're going to put this kid in charge of the complete project, being the director and hiring all their friends and what have you. And they wonder why they can't bring in a show in on time, or it's completely over budget, or it's not working out. And it's usually because they don't hire anybody who knows how the production process works in the first place for something on animation. And nowadays it doesn't matter, because we don't have any, what seems to be to me is that with streaming, there is no actual deadline per se on a show, because they release them all together. And when a new show comes out, it just comes out when it comes out. So I have not seen how that works out, but it's like with my last bout on Curious George, PBS got together with, I believe, Hulu, and they put aside a huge chunk of money that was to be for 5 seasons of Curious George and I think 2 movies. And what happened was the executive producer who got on that particular show was so money. She, from what I understand, when she got the outtakes back from the animation, this has never been done ever. They had something like 90% retakes on the film. And that just doesn't happen. I mean, it's if you've got 90% retakes, something was done wrong in pre-production. That shouldn't happen. And part of it was too, they didn't send an overseas supervisor. And one of the things that an overseas supervisor does is that they explain, those nice little quirky things that you can't explain. It's going over to China. This one went over to Taipei, I believe, for animation. And the thing is that you get an overseas supervisor because, number one, they're like a babysitter. They're the eyes of the studio who says, hey, I'm making sure that everything's getting done on the right schedule and the right time, and talking to the people over here. And also, if they have problems understanding, okay, we sent over these types of model sheets, you're not following the model sheets, or you need extra model sheets, or you need extra this because we're not seeing this in the animation. And a lot of times the overseas supervisors also will fill in the animation, because a lot of overseas supervisors are actually animators, and they will take chunks of animation. I went overseas when I was a director for a brief period of time on Project Geeker, and the folks were on Tweety and Sylvester and Superman were working in the same office I was working at. And they would have animators who would be redoing actual scenes to make sure those scenes looked okay. So they were going in and cleaning up some of the models and stuff right there. And so here's Curious George. It's a traditionally done animation, and they decided they weren't going to initially have timing directing done on them, which was really stupid, but they were going to have an overseas supervisor. So when they got 90% retakes coming back, oh, gee whiz, I wonder why you don't have a representative over there looking at the work to make sure it gets done correctly before it actually gets filmed, to bring down the number of retakes. It was one of those, it's like, here, I'm going to throw my child into the water without a life preserver because I know my child can swim. Yeah, and your child gets tired and then they drown. It was one of those sorts of things. So the horror stories are vast, especially when it comes to, you're sitting there, you're one of the cogs in the machine, and you watch the people who have the money, where you're going, I could have taken all the money that you just wasted and made an entire new show just with all that money that you wasted. Or that could have been part of my salary. Or, you think about all these things while you're watching the executive, just let's throw the money down the drain. Happens all the time. Anyways, where else can I take you folks? That was a good one though. It's like, yeah, lots of that.
Does Mark have a question?
Oh, sorry. No, I forgot to lower my hand. Let me take.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. No, it is a crazy business. It's one of those that I can say I've had. What's funny too is because I work union for a lot of the shows, and with union you're not supposed to work overtime, and you should be paid for overtime, and those sorts of things. In an animation, it just doesn't happen, because every time you work on this job, you're also working to get the next job. So the thing is that if your associate producer knows that you are turning in your stuff on time, they will always, every associate producer out there will never give you enough time to do the job, ever. And it's like the last time I ever had enough time to do a job was probably in 1997, when I remember that we had 6 weeks to do Hercules, which is a really complicated show. And I actually felt relaxed where I could get all my work done in a week and get it turned around and not have to worry about staying late, and had a real life and got actual weekends and sleep and all that stuff. From then it's like, I had like 7 years where a lot of studios would keep a lot of people freelance, and they would give you basically, here's the show, here's the same amount of work, we're going to cut off 1 week. So you had only 5 weeks to get the job done instead of 6. Since you're freelance, you can't charge overtime. And since you're freelance, we're going to pay you a flat fee, and then we're going to divide your union hours into that flat fee. And that's what we're going to tell the union, that you're getting paid in hours. So there was a lot of that stuff going on too. And, you know, now that we have the computers are supposed to make your life easier, and they're not. They're actually making it worse, because I have to draw twice as many drawings now than I used to, because again, they want to make it look animated. And they want to see, the thing is that when you're doing it on Toon Boom, you also have to put white behind your drawings, because otherwise the background show through. And now the program does fill in the backgrounds, but when we first got Toon Boom, they first brought in Toon Boom in about 2008. And the thing drew like crud. I mean, the drawing tools in it were crud. The processors weren't fast enough so that you could draw the stuff fast enough. I always did an amalgamated combination of, a lot of times I would draw my backgrounds in pencil, import them into Toon Boom, and basically that's the way I get certain things done faster. Or I'll thumb in pencil and then scan in the drawings into Toon Boom. And I keep on trying to find ways to make it faster and faster, because they still, they've gradually, finally, they've gotten more in-house people who are forcing them to give you more time. But the thing that cracks me up too is that the boards that I've done in-house and the boards that you put in your portfolio have got to be 2 different things, because the boards they actually use for production and the boards that you show so that you can get another job, you have to do these squeaky clean, pretty things that nobody ever uses in real production. So that's another fun thing with the new world of animation. But that's about it. Oh, and here's the other great one. I was telling you about Tess. I worked on the original Pinky and the Brain. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with that particular cartoon. And I won an Emmy for Pinky and the Brain Christmas, and another one for Cutie and the Beast, which was an Animaniacs cartoon. And Steven Spielberg is rebooting Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain. I was on Curious George the first time I found out about this was in the end of 2017. My associate producer was going over to be the associate producer on that show, and I said, Carrie, you're going over there. The season of Curious George had just been let off. I would love to work on Animaniacs again. I said, sure, send over your book and I'll see what I can do. Kept hounding on him for a couple of months, and he said, sorry, but we're all crewed up and they've got their people that they want to use. Okay, fine, that happens. Found out later, Steven Spielberg laid down the order that nobody who had worked on the original Animaniacs or Pinky and the Brain was allowed to work on the most recent iteration of it. It came down officially from him that, and there were a lot of people who are still in the industry who could have worked on that project, but didn't get to work on that project because it came down on high from Steven Spielberg that they couldn't work on it. And it wasn't because it was necessary, you know, it's like, we're just doing what we're told. when you're a storyboard artist, you do what the director tells you to do. And it's like, oh, gee whiz, it was an award-winning, wonderful show in the past that everybody loved. Why would it not still be an award-winning show that everybody loved if you used even some of the people who worked on the original? And I tried just recently to get on cleanup for it. And they said my animating, the Warners that I did were fine, but the Pinky and the Brain that I did just didn't cut the mustard. And I was like, at the first they gave me model sheets that hadn't been cleaned up. And then the person I was doing the test for said, oh, we sent you the do's and don'ts pack, right? And I said, no. So they finally sent me the do's and don'ts pack, and I redid it. And still, for some reason, they didn't like the way that I drew the characters that I drew completely on model. So, you know, I have no idea what went wrong there. And I would have liked to have worked on the second iteration of it, but hey, those things happen sometimes.
Do you think also that it's probably they're trying to cut costs by not bringing in the like original crew?
No, because honestly, here's the other thing. Honestly, I keep telling people I will work at journeyman's wage. They're a union shop. Honestly, the number of people who get to work above journeyman's wage now is next to nil. You take it at the lowest rate they offer you, and you take it. Negotiation. I haven't been able to negotiate up a salary in years. They tell me what they're going to give me and I take it, because there are 10 other people waiting for my job, 15. And it's not like it used to be where the thing is that in my industry, experience and knowledge means nothing. Because everybody's got the same amount of experience and knowledge that you have. I mean, it's one of these things where they don't understand about working under pressure or turnaround or things like that. Their attitude is, hey, if you've done 2 years in animation, you can do this. So they just look for the standard line is, we just want somebody with 2 years experience. So that's why I actually have literally cut off anything before 8 years ago on my resume. I keep my resume short and sweet. I try to make myself look like I just got out of college, so that I don't price myself out. I only put down journeyman's wage, because they're not looking for people with experience. The people, I've always said, when it comes to animation, they look at you as a pencil, and you can be replaced by another pencil. And right now there are a crud load of pencils out there, and they all look pretty dang fine. And the thing is that HR department, they don't know the difference from one artist to another. As long as your work looks good and it speaks to them, and hey, you've only got 2 years experience, great. You're young. You have more fresh ideas if you're young. And the thing is that with animation, it's not about having a fresh idea per se, if you're working from a script. But a lot of them now, they're doing what they call board-driven shows, which is based on a premise where you're supposed to come up with the writing of it as well. So, and the thing is that I can promise you that anybody of my generation would kill to do any of those shows, because we've been stuck with really bad scripts for thousands of years. So it's like most people who are board artists are also writers, because we end up fixing most of the scripts ourselves. I mean, what you do is you get a bad piece of writing and you work it up with your acting, your staging, and gags, because usually you can't touch the words, but you can play with what's going on while they say the words. So you can play with the funny by the actions the characters do while they're saying the words. So the thing is that almost all of that is written by you as a board artist. So you are a writer per se. My favorite example of that was when I was working on My Little Pony. With My Little Pony, I get these huge blocks of dialogue. And they never said what the ponies are supposed to be doing while they're saying these huge blocks of dialogue. So you have to give them what's known as business. You got to give them something to do that is entertaining to watch while we're having them do this diatribe, so the kids don't get bored. And 75% of that stuff's done by the artists. When they do an action script and the fight ensues, every fight sequence you ever see done is not written out. That is all, literally, and so does this and that. It's like 2 sentences, and that 2 sentences goes on for at least 50 panels, because the writer hasn't given you a play-by-play for what the fight sequence is supposed to look like. And fight sequences go by pretty fast. So if you have a fight sequence that you enjoyed watching, bless the artist who wrote it, because it wasn't the script writer who gave you that. It's usually the artist that gets to do that. And that's actually part of the fun of being a board artist, is throwing in the gags and doing that writing and adding that stuff. One of the things that I've always said, as a storyboard artist, you get to be everybody, especially if you're working in TV. You get to be the writer, the director, the actor, the everything. And that's the great thing about television, or the great thing about the sequential. Now that we're not doing television, we're doing streaming, is that you get more say in that cartoon than any other individual that works on that cartoon. It's like when I see one of my cartoons, I can see everything that I've done. And it's like that the biggest part of the thinking, aside from the writer who did the script, is me up there on the screen. And that's very gratifying. The non-gratifying thing is that up until about, it's been 10 years now, but still, you couldn't see it unless you were home watching television. I mean, I never got to see any of my Darkwing Ducks until about 10 years ago, because I wasn't home to watch the Darkwing Ducks. Or I didn't get to see Cutie and the Beast or the Pinky and the Brain Christmas special until they came out on DVD. So that's like, you're imagining that. I always say that storyboard artists think in the 4th dimension, because we think in film, we think in time. I'm seeing that film in my head when I draw, but we're transferring that 4th dimension down into 2 dimensions like a comic book. But we're also having to think about the animator and what they're having to do with the pieces. And what's really amazing is when you've done your storyboard and then the next person down the line pluses it. That's the biggest high in the world. A lot of the times it doesn't work that way. My friend Curt Anderson, one of the most amazing board artists in the world, if you ever see his boards, they are just a joy to look at, because the drawing is so beautiful and he gets the acting just right. And it's just, you could frame every panel of his storyboards, because especially when we were drawing in pencil, one of the things that we're really missing out on now that we're going to digital is that you'll never see those drawings again. One of the things that I did do, and I'm scanning them in now, is that if you've seen the last scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they put the Ark in that vault where there are 50 million boxes of stuff, that's Disney. I mean, they will, they save all their stuff or they throw it in a paper shredder. I used to dumpster dive when I was at Disney before they threw the stuff in the paper shredder. When I was working on Darkwing Duck, Tad Stones, who was the director, one day said, "I'm putting all these storyboards out here. Anybody who wants them, take them. They're going in the trash." I have 3 file boxes full of Darkwing Duck boards of various people. Thank you. Yes, I agree. In my barn that Disney will never show you. You can't get a hold of these babies. I've got them because they didn't get in the paper shredder. And I've got that for the Bible for Batman. And I've got that for a few other things where it's like, if you're in house, it's like they're throwing this out in the garbage. Hi, this is coming home with me. That I used to call my retirement insurance, which it still may be. It's like, it's going to be, who do I send these to before I'm dead? But it's one of these things where we're putting it all on computer now. And I've got model packs for various things that if they're never printed out, I keep on thinking, has anybody here ever seen the James Caan version of Rollerball? Okay, at least one person. I would highly recommend, if you can get a hold of that movie, one of the things in the middle of the movie, there's a giant computer where they put all knowledge is in this computer. And they lost a whole of the 20th century. The computer loses all of the 20th century. And one of the things that I am afraid of as we move on, we are in the transition period. We are in that period where we're going from the horse and buggy to the car. And we're going from the period where we're going from paper to digital. And I wonder how much of the amazing artwork out there and that we never get to see, which is, I mean, I keep on thinking about how long it took me to see an original Da Vinci. I mean, the only original Da Vinci that I know of that's in this country is in the National Gallery in Washington. And I saw it when I was 16. And I realized that all the other Da Vincis I've ever seen are printed on paper in books. But I got to see Da Vinci's that way. And nowadays we have the computer. And you know, if you want to see Da Vinci's or you want to see a particular artist, and you could literally probably, there's some place on the internet where you can go through a catalog of that. But I keep on wondering, we're doing all this digital work, and how much of that digital work will be saved for the next generation, or whether they'll even be able to find it. I do whole storyboards that are, like I said, 1,200 images in a storyboard. Well, I can pull out the storyboards that I did for the Pinky and the Brain Christmas special, and you can go and flip through them, just, you know, and look through it like it's a comic book. I did similar amounts on Rock Dog, but it's digital. It hasn't been printed out on paper. Will it go to the next iteration of the program that I did it in? Will anybody ever see that preliminary work that somebody did? Will anybody, you know, there's all kinds of stuff like that. There are cartoons. I mean, here's the other side of thing with film. I mean, we're all here as individual artists, but it's one of these things where I think we're all trying to leave an impression on somebody else. Because, you know, it's the good old art isn't art unless it's, well, that's not true either. I mean, art is art just for the creation of it. I know everybody here is an artist, and everybody gets a high out of just sketching in a sketchbook. I mean, the frustration or the joy or the pain of drawing in a sketchbook, we all get high off of one way or another. You know, from God, this drawing looks like crap, or yeah, this one turned out great, or, you know, will anybody ever see this, or I don't care, or I've expressed something, or what have you. It's always nice to be able to share it with somebody else somehow, some way. I think some of the best experiences that I've had as a storyboard artist is I also publish my own books. I have a couple of books that I've produced and prints. And I used to go to San Diego Comic-Con, and I used to sell my stuff there. And I would put out a sign that said, you know, Emmy Award winning storyboard artist from Animaniacs, and I'd hang it up. And the thing that would draw everybody though would be I have a crew jacket. We used to get crew jackets. We had one made for Animaniacs. And I hang my crew jacket up there, and it's the leather type, the good old, like, varsity jacket. And it's got the water tower on the back of it. It's got Pinky and the Brain on one side and Warner Brothers on the other. And I would hang that up at the booth, and people would come over and want to have their photographs taken with me, because I was their touchstone for that show. I was a real person that was a part of that joy that they felt from watching that cartoon. And it makes your artwork real. It didn't matter that the particular cartoon that they liked was any particular one that I worked on. It was nice to be a touchstone for somebody to be able to come over and say, this is a human that worked on my really favorite thing. And it was really nice for me as an artist to be able to share that with them. And I know you guys, if any of you guys have done conventions or have done a draw for somebody, or even I know you guys do drink and draws, and you do a drink and draw, somebody comes over, my favorite question, are you an artist when you're drawing? I love that when you're drawing and they come up to you and they go, are you an artist? And it's like, you have to bite your tongue and say, yes, I'm an artist. Then you go, you can't tell by I'm drawing here. Anybody drawing, no matter how bad they're drawing, is an artist, which is my standard. When I used to go to the Los Angeles Zoo and draw, I had a t-shirt that I actually wore that said artist at work on the back of it. So they had to come up with a different line than are you an artist? But they still would ask me if I was an artist. But that one little communication, because most of us who are artists, we give our work to people, and a lot of times that audience is anonymous. And when you're in animation, you really are anonymous. But it's really fun when you have that opportunity to connect and know that the artwork that you have done has meant something to somebody. And nowadays, I think with the internet, there's a little bit more of that. Not as much, but sometimes when you get somebody who comes in and says, I really like that drawing you did, and you have a little bit of extra boost for doing your work. But that's the one thing that doing the conventions has always been a fun thing to do, just because you do get that. A lot of times I said, before I hung up it was my friend Linda who said, hang up the jacket, let them know. It's like, oh, okay. Because you never think, oh, that's going to be something important. Anything else? Have I not answered questions that anybody else that I've covered? Because like I said, I can always ramble on something else, believe me. It's kind of, you're in a cubicle for most of your life, or you're in your studio for most of your life, and you're let out to talk to people, and it's like, ooh, I can let the mouth run. So is there anything that I haven't covered or you'd like to hear about, or that I can express any further here?
It's me again. Sorry.
No.
I don't know how much of what you've got that you've collected from all these projects is in paper or is digital, but I do know that the growing Popular Culture Museum of the Special Collections of San Diego State University would take them readily.
Good.
They would love them, and I can get you that connection.
You give me that connection, I would really appreciate that, because actually I have some of your work that needs to go down there eventually, because it's like, if people don't know, I'm one of Donna's fangirls. I am, seriously.
We're from two ends of the industry. It's hey, look, every single time you send me some of those extremely juicy books that you send me, they've got those. So they're in my special collections along with all my books, but you need to start your own. So they pull them out of mine and they put them in yours.
Actually, that's not a bad idea. I will do that.
Well, I'll tell you this right now, it helps them raise funds, because at this point I have heard that the shelf full of stuff I've sent them, including my art, my books, all the books from other artists, all the projects, etc. It evidently now fills 40 feet of their shelves.
Bravo.
You send me something, it goes there. And on
Bravo.
top of that, they use them to fundraise. And my stuff has been valued at $250,000. So they get to, they get to fundraise. And also you hold your own copyright, or whoever's got it holds their own copyright, because at one point they wanted copyright so they didn't have to contact back. But then they got to actually looking at copyright, and they went, no, you keep that. We don't want to touch that. That's too messy. So we will hold it. It's climate control, by the way.
Cool. No, bless Disney,
Literally.
the idiocy in copyright. When I think of, I think about Norman Rockwell and the fact that, he spent half his life buying back his paintings from, that was totally uncalled for. But it's like, here's the thing. It's like with Disney, and Disney has a contract. Oh my God. The Disney contract is the most insane thing you can possibly sign. It literally says on it that anything that you do for them while you're working for them is theirs for in perpetuity, from time immemorial, or what have you. It is you could not enforce this contract.
No, you can't.
And the thing is that on top of that, if you're working for Disney, you're automatically in the union. You cannot work for Disney without being part of the union, because they are one of the contractees to Local 839. So the union contract says whatever you do on your own free time is your business. The Disney contract says what you do, no matter whether it's on their time or your time, is theirs. And the last time I worked for Disney, it's like I'm doing my own projects and what have you, and coming up with my own stuff. And so I went through the contract and I started putting lines through things, because it's perfectly legitimate when you have a contract that's printed out to put lines through things.
Yep.
And say, no, I don't agree to this.
Mhm.
And so their lawyer called me up and no, you got to sign it the way it is. And I'm going,
No, I don't.
basically, here's the thing. It's under threat. I can write down. He said I couldn't write anything out. Otherwise, I wouldn't get the job. He didn't say it verbally, because that could be taken up in court. But he implied, which is good enough, that if I didn't sign the contract the way it was, I didn't get the job. So the implication is enough to take into court. Beyond that, union supersedes anything that they put in the freaking contract. So I said, just make a list of the things that you're going to do or you plan on doing, and say, these items are already in the works. Disney has no control over them. You add that as an addendum to the contract. But this contract, it's worth, it's like, I've saved all my Disney contracts just so people can see this is the most sane nutso contract you'd ever, nobody would sign this in their right mind.
No,
Or
I've
should-
seen worse ones.
And
There's a
it's like, if
local,
I
there's a
had
local
no
company.
for the union,
Hmm?
it would be like, okay, I'm signing away my friggin' life. Because they say, oh, you have to take all your sketchbooks and turn in your sketchbooks after you've finished working for them. And it's like, what the F? It's all that sort of thing, because it's like, we want to cover everything here. And it's like, you can't do that. But hey, we got it on paper and we'll scare you enough.
Have they ever even heard of the Barron Convention?
What is it? I haven't. Tell me, what's the bearing?
It covers copyright internationally, and the United States is a signatory.
Ah,
Go look that up and dive into it. And that thing is
Ooh.
extremely protective of artists, and you should know about it. And you should go. It's got Wikipedia, of course, which is run by the old Britannica people who now have their job with them. Has a long, juicy, complicated, linked up article about the Barron Convention.
ooh, I love
And it's
Wikipedia.
about
Wikipedia,
international copyright law, including those protecting artists.
cool. I will take that. I will look that up. But Disney's bit with contracts is that, and this is not, it just doesn't go for Disney. It also goes for Warner Brothers, which is Universal MCA. It goes for And that's the crack up too. As we've gone on in life, you do know the great, like I said, again, Rollerball. Gotta watch that flick. I watched that when I was in high school, and it is so nascent what's going on, where the corporations own everything. There are 5, count them, 5, entertainment companies in the world that own everything. You got Viacom, you got Disney, you got Universal MCA, you got Warner Brothers, and who am I missing? I'm missing one here. Can't remember. Sorry, but there are only 5 of them. And when it comes to animation, you're working for one of them. I'm trying to think if there's any. There are some small animation studios, but it's like I was working for Rock Dog. They're working for Lionsgate. Lionsgate is owned by Viacom, I think now. Not sure who, but that's the big thing too, is that you get these contracts that, you know, you basically sign your life away, but none of these contracts have ever been brought up in court. None of the things in the contracts have ever been brought up in court. And this was something that the lawyer brought to me too. They will not bring up, it's like there are, if you go on the internet, there are all kinds of people who are making all kinds of money doing Disney stuff, doing all kinds of fan stuff. If it doesn't bring or take away at least $75,000, and this was let's see here, this is probably close to 10 years ago. So it's probably gone up to like at least $150,000 now. Disney won't even think to look at it, because that's what's going to cost them in lawyers and court fees to even bring it before the court. So if anybody does anything like, there's some amazing Disney fan art out there that is just spectacular. And what they'll do is they'll do limited runs. They'll put them on the internet for a few weeks, and then they'll do the sale, and that's done. And it's fast enough where nobody can come after them. And there's somebody, they're doing that with Harry Potter. They're doing that with all the licensing stuff. So there's a lot of pirate art going on out there too right now. But that's the thing with the Disney contracts. They may say, you got to turn in your sketchbook, you got to turn in your artwork, you got to turn in anything that you've done. And it's like, I have got an attic full of storyboards. I mean, I used to keep at least 3 copies of every storyboard I did. And if I could get somebody else's storyboard, I'd get a copy of theirs too. So I have got 30 years of animation and a barn. So that's a great thing to know, Donna, because somebody's got to have this stuff.
Well, you guys are hooked up with Graphic Artists Guild, right?
Do they have an archive?
The Graphic Artists Guild is like a hammer on law. They know they do not let anybody get away with anything. I mean, you can go look at, gag.org. I know, terrible website name. Gag.org. Go look it up, buy their book or whatever. It's industry standard for art, and get it out into the animation world. This is weird. Could we be here actually getting these legal powers into animation at this little meeting?
Well, what's really interesting right now is that our union does have a business rep. We do have, we're in the middle of contract negotiations right now. There's a big possibility that we're going to end up striking, because part of what the producers are required to do is they pay for health insurance. So the nice thing is, if you're working in a union, we're part of IATSE, the international, basically it's the grips, the gaffers, anybody who builds scenery, costumers, makeup artists, they all belong to IATSE. And the thing is that IATSE, with the animation union, we do have, like I said, the contract in the union supersedes anything that Disney wants to throw at us. the big problem with that is every contract negotiation, they give something away. One of the reasons why we're having to do tests and not get paid for it is because some dumb idiot during one of the contract negotiations said that they could test us within reason. And they left it that vague. So they can give us any kind of test they want within reason to make sure that we have the skills that they desire. And that's part of our frickin' contract that some dumb jerk off let through during one of the negotiations about 15 years ago. And I have a funny feeling I know which dumb jerk off did it. He's currently retired. But the reason why it never got out of there was because he was our business rep for about 10 years before he retired. And I believe that he was responsible for it. So it's like, the problem is that when you have a union, you do have a herd of cats who are doing stuff. And sometimes that herd of cats doesn't want to do the right thing either. So we're having, like I said, we're having contract negotiations concerning healthcare because we're making money hand over fist for the studios right now, but that doesn't matter. They still want to take something back. And because the people who are negotiating aren't it's not shareholders. What's the word I want? They're not the stakeholders. They're lawyers. So their job is to take away whatever they can from the people that they're opposing. They're not stakeholders, so they don't give a crap. And so they're going to do everything that they can to make us strike. So what most likely is going to happen within, I would suspect sometime around October. You know, what's really funny is that somebody on our Discord, we have a union Discord, said, oh, keep the cards close to your vest. Don't let anybody know that we might strike. It's like, oh, let's see here. They're not giving us the health care we need. They're not going to negotiate on renewing the contract. And we have only one thing that we can do. You think they might think that we might strike because we're not backing down? So if you hear that the cartoonists are striking in about sometime around October, do not be surprised.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time the animators.
No, but the last time that we really did this, it was really stupid. This time it's not. The last time we did this, it was a strike for the ink and paint department. They were sending it overseas. And there was nothing that was going to stop that. We didn't have any laws in the nation that said you could not do that. And the thing is if there is no law in the nation that says you can't send labor away, hey, looks what has happened to our factories and manufacturing in this country. We don't have any laws that says you can't. How many factories literally got wrapped up in cellophane and sent over to China? That's all they did. They took the machinery. They took the machinery that, one of the things that blew me away is that that's machinery that my grandfather, as an engineer, designed some of that factory machinery. That's intelligence that this country produced that they just wrapped up and sent over to China, that China just got to use to reverse engineer and utilize the factories and use the materials there. And we've done this instead of raising the boats. We did this with the boats overseas, and that's the same thing we're doing with art. Unfortunately, it used to be at least you could rely on getting work locally. You can still get work locally if you do a portraiture. If you do caricature, you can do caricature parties, that sort of thing. But it's like that's not a living. And the thing is that, let's face it, making a living as an artist has always been a difficult venture, no matter what. But there's nothing that, we aren't Ireland. At least Ireland, if you're an artist, you don't pay taxes. And Ireland has gotten a lot of animation studios opened in Ireland. So Brown Bags in Ireland, Brown Bags in Wales. These are studios that I have applied to. I have worked for Chinese studios, and I have worked for Korean studios when I couldn't get work here. And I have worked for their wages too, which is really, 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 really low. So that sort of things happens as well.
Well, it's
But,
just something we're gonna have to face because, right, like I just put in the chat, that we kind of invented that system of strip it, grab it, and run with it. And you know, roost, meat, chicken.
yeah,
So,
that's kind of the way it works.
yeah.
But
if we didn't like that system, we shouldn't have set it up.
yeah, but as it is, my best suggestion is I'm trying to find a way to basically rework my art so that it's viable, and probably something to bring up at the drink and draw. How to start really pushing your art so that you can make a living in other ways. What I'm figuring is that I'm still trying to get work in animation, but while I'm trying to get work in animation, I'm also rethinking, okay, how do I make a living on my own as an artist and make it viable in the world of the internet? And one of the ways I'm finding, I used to do, along with storyboard art, my quote unquote side business was doing fantasy artwork for not Magic the Gathering, but it's some of the competitors. One was called Legend of the Five Rings, and another was called Warlord. And Warlord had its 20th anniversary this year. That was kind of fun. But what the thing is, people are playing Worlds of Warcraft online now, and they play these multiplayer games where they come up with their own avatars. And one of the things that I'm going to start doing is offering portraiture of you as your avatar, and finding ways of creating artwork that is more personal, so that people start looking to me to create independent artwork. And I like Donna's suggestion. The thing is coming up with that just right animation that everybody wants to look at, that's short, that's fun, that people will watch again and again. One of the things that I'm trying to think, there's a CGI spider that I've been following occasionally, and I'm trying to think what his name is. It's like Arnold the Spider. But it's a little jumping spider that some guy did his nephew's voice for, and it caught on, and he's using the monetization that he did of these little animations to pay for his nephew's college tuition. It's his nephew's college fund. He works in animation, he does animation, but he's also getting these animations working. It used to be too, one of the things is that I, as being of an older generation, YouTube's finally gotten to the point where you can upload things and it doesn't take a day and a half to upload them. And that is something that is much better now too. I mean, it takes me, I used to do holiday animations. I used to do e-cards just for my friends. And I did a holiday animation that was about a minute long. I can now find music on the internet that is not expensive, that's copyright free, that I can use on my animations. And I can upload things faster. So it also makes things, if you're an independent and you want to do things that are short and sweet. And the problem is again, getting eyeballs on your work.
Well, like I say, I've got is a suggestion about building on YouTube, doing something fast on TikTok. There's somebody called Call Me Chris, KALLMEKRIS, and she does just idiot little films of herself, and they are so funny. And she is such an amazing actress, that she plays all the parts. She plays all these different people, and you can watch how that audience has grown and how it got monetized. And these things these run awfully fast, because remember what else you're working with when you're on YouTube. You're talking about a massive advertising base that is your fans, and they tell everybody and they share it like crazy, and before you know it, you're in the millions for follow. I specifically mentioned her and the mythology guy because if you see just how all they really care about is the story and the comedy and the acting. They're not worried about high level technicals or anything else. They're just, people want to connect. And if you go to those two specifically, those are ones I'm talking about, just to see how people take something very short. Now, they're not animators, but there are animators on there just popping out little things. And there's some heartbreaking stuff out there. Oh my God, you can't hardly, 30 seconds of heartbreak. And
Simon the
gorgeous. What's that?
Simon the cat.
Oh, Simon the cat. Zipped right out.
Yeah.
That's another one.
But the thing is that it's like what you think, but what you don't realize is that that small bit of animation probably took a lot of thought and a lot of time.
Yes,
and it's the coming up with the genius thing that's going to catch on. That's the tough one. It's like a combination of, okay, what do you do that works, and does it keep working? That's the one that's tough too.
Well, that's one thing about watching these people, because their first films are rickety and they're trying to figure out what the heck they're doing.
Yeah.
And the thing about YouTube is and this is another thing, what I put up on my Patreon, you probably noticed that everybody gets to see the developmental stuff first.
Yeah.
People want to be in your studio with you. They want to be backstage with you. They want to, eat popcorn and watch the process.
Yeah. That is very true. I got to keep that in mind too.
Yeah, I mean, the future is for most of us is not, they're going to have enough people to do the big animation studios, but there's going to be an awful lot of other people who are going to have to go back to a model that is 200 years old. And that's the self-employed entrepreneur. You either worked on giant farms, or you were servants or something, or you ran your own bar or whatever. And that is what you're going to be doing. And we've got the tools, we've got the ability, and the kids are doing it. And believe it or not, if you go over on Instagram, there's an awful lot of kids who are doing nothing but paper.
Oh yeah.
They love it.
Oh yeah. No, the one thing that I actually, one of the things that I like about Instagram is I like connecting up with some of the younger kids. I like seeing that development work. What was really sweet, like I said, I worked on a card game called Warlord, and man, I am pulling tooth and nail trying to get more followers on Instagram. But it's funny. I've gone up to, what was it, 220 or 626, and then down to 624, and then up to 625, and then I don't know what their algorithm is, but it's like and I'm one of these that I'll go and I'll get other people. I'll go and like other people, but I've got about 1,000 now, and there's some people that I really like looking at their work, and I don't want to get have to follow so many followers that I miss some of the people that I really enjoy seeing their stuff.
Well, I'm watching the people that are growing, and it's like crabgrass. Have you seen that? Amazing thing. If anybody wants to know, it's a little black city kid that moves out and makes friends with a redheaded stepchild out in the country. And it's their daily traumas and just trying to make idiot boy tricks, and put in their sisters and big brothers and everything else. It's family stories, and they are hilarious and wonderful.
What was this? Crabgrass.
It's on Instagram.
Okay.
And it's like I say, it's this really neat, quick, fast drawings. And it's a black kid because the artist is black, and the black kid moves out of the city, and he meets up with this Paul White family, and which so much reminds me of my family. I just was like, oh my God. And so everybody's trying to interact, and Donna, the mother, and the black mother ends up drinking because her kids are driving her nuts. And so she ends up over with the hick mother, and it's a scream. It's hilarious.
I will
You
add
gotta see it.
Instagram stuff tonight.
Yep.
But
I should end up being a connection and agent person the way I've been doing lately.
Well,
but again, it's like you're trying to get people to see what you're doing out there, and then that takes time too.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you're drawing, you're putting stuff out there, and it's a very, very strange new world we're all working in right now.
Yeah, but once you get some faithful followers, they start exploding out as advertising. So pay attention to what you're doing, how you're connecting with people's hearts and minds. Thank you, Vietnam. And if you get those people, they'll just blast out and tell everybody.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. These people are not worrying about the advertising so much as they are getting the story out.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, as fun as this is, and I'm sure we can go longer. We passed the 2-hour mark a little while
Oh my
ago.
God.
So
Sorry.
anyway, I want to thank Llyn again for a wonderful talk.
Really.
You're very welcome.
Yep. And anyway, as mentioned before, if anybody wants more fun, to join us next week at our drinking draw on Thursday at 6:30. I have the link in the chat, and it will be on the link will also be on the Facebook page as well. Other things, the assorted October sketch challenges are coming up, and with any luck, if anybody wants to show their stuff when that starts, we'll be showcasing that on Facebook as well. But anyway, thank you again for coming, and I hope everybody has a fantastic evening.